In this eternal circus of life and death.
Oh.
Welcome to another episode of The Pew.
It's like the view. It's like the view, but with fetuses.
We have remixed it into The Pew, which is a much better bunch of people and ideas. So the music of Fellini 8.5 team from Nino Rota is playing in the background, and of course our first thoughts go with Italy. Overnight 135 cases are now confirmed of the coronavirus in Italy, and I will of course inaugurate this program with an article which I've been working on. Sorry, if you can mute if you have any problems with the sound. Okay, so cases of the COVID-19 coronavirus in Italy make it the most affected country in the world after Japan and South Korea. They rose overnight to 135, killing 2 people in the process. They is expanding between Lombardy, Veneto, and Emilia-Romagna. This is basically concentrated in an area which is really the industrial heart and jointly accounts for more than 50% of gross domestic output. So basically this standstill will be a catastrophe for everybody. Luxottica, that makes the glasses of Ray-Ban, Gucci, Prada, that's closed down. The Fashion Week in Milan is actually Armani, Giorgio Armani today is holding his show closed doors with no people in it to avoid any problems. So that's from Armani in Milan. Of course, all this could have been prevented if the Italians listened to the warnings that we gave immediately after the first 2 people from China, from Wuhan, were discovered with coronavirus at the end of January. But already back then, as you can see from my past shows, and special that I did here on the Lyon Zagami channel, the problem is the superficiality. I mean, even today while I was watching the news, people are not wearing the mask. They are not really taking the necessary precautions. Of course, food is running scarce in the supermarkets. Carabinieri police is now is in front of the supermarket, letting only 2 or 3 people at a time inside. There is on lockdown several towns. This will be a catastrophe, guys. This is a pandemic, and today, first of all, I want to point out who are the people responsible for all this, because there is some names that have to be made, and it's not in Italy here, but in the World Health Organization, that these crooks needs to be found and need to be exposed for the good of mankind. As Iran confirms its 7th COVID-19 death, and the Korean Center for Disease Control and Prevention reports 223 new cases today, bringing the total to 556, and sparking, of course, fears of a greater transmission outside of China. Now, South Korea and Italy seems to be outbreaks that are going out of control, just as Iran. Who is responsible? Well, there is a person responsible. There is a motherfucker, and I'm gonna make his name, and he's corrupt. And his name is Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, and he's the head of the World Health Organization, who has been elected in 2017 because China gave 200 million to build a new center for disease control in Africa. Motherfuckers from the United Nations, you are playing with the health of mankind, and I'm not going to take this lightly. So whoever wants to stand with me can stand with me in the pew. Whoever can go away, because Leo Zagami is no censorship, and Leo Zagami tells the truth, and he tells it in the face of the enemy. United Nations, you are the home of the Antichrist. But we will come and get you, and we will come and get you one by one and hang you by the balls. Okay? So let me resume here who is responsible for this. In January 2017, the Center for Disease Control, the first Center for Disease Control and Prevention, was opened up in Addis Ababa, in Ethiopia. Soon after, a corrupt Marxist director general was chosen, and this guy is called Tedros, in bed with China. China gave him 200 million to build this center in Ethiopia. Earlier this month, the Trump administration, of course, had concerns for all this situation, for this spying over Africa by China, who is financing also another 80 million center, always in Ethiopia. In the meantime, Tedros has lied to mankind about the real threat of the coronavirus in exchange for his silence and for the corruption of the whole World Health Organization, that, by the way, is financed mostly by money that comes from US taxpayers, not China. The money of China goes in the pockets of this corrupt individual that go with prostitutes, cocaine, and ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. So, these people are not the only ones corrupt. Of course, last week on the margins of the Monaco Security Council in Germany, there was another important meeting, the first since the communist China revolution, between two institutions, which are, of course, the Vatican and China. Another important player in all this is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, in bed with Tedros. Tedros is a criminal, and I don't care if they come and get me. I don't care if they get the United Nations to come and issue an international arrest warrant for me at this point. You can understand that if I get arrested, or if I get by any means put in jail here in the United States, that will be under President Donald J. Trump, who has to take his own responsibilities and all this, because he has intervened, or at least there was an official from the Trump administration that said the following earlier this month about what is going on. It's a threat to Africa. Africa has vast amounts of genomic data, and the Chinese want to build the CDC to eventually steal the data from all the other centers. The role of Africa CDC and the World Health Organization is compromised, and we need to investigate as soon as possible Dr. Tedros and his dangerous relation with China before the COVID-19, of course, gets out of hand also here in the US. So this was my opening line. Now you can take it from here. Thank you very much. Roseanne, please.
Well, I typed stuff into the chat because I wanted to mention that in Russia, I read today that they are arresting Chinese nationals and that the army is doing it. They're searching for Chinese people and arresting them and quarantining them.
Well, there is a problem here, Roseanne. You see, they have told us that the quarantine should be 14 days. Now, they have told us that a case surge in China after 27 days. And to tell you the truth, this outbreak in Italy comes after 20 days, basically, from when these two Chinese from Wuhan were brought to hospital in Rome after being in Milan, taking a bath, going through Lodi because they took a bus with other people. They went through Lodi, then they went through Parma. All the affected areas that are now popping up are those. And of course, then we have Venice, which is full of Chinese anyway, that come all the time from. So this is the situation. Please, Roseanne, if you want to take it from here, or John, or Reverend David William Parry, or of course Lowell in Jerusalem. Welcome everybody. Sorry for the abrupt start today, but we are living in a dramatic situation and in unprecedented times. Please, Roseanne.
My boyfriend couldn't find any coffee milk. Sorry.
Well,
I lost my train of thought.
No worries. I think that it's very important, first of all, to pray.
Well, it is. I know what I wanted to say. Yeah. That's globalism, because Milan, it probably has all Chinese workers. You know what I mean? Let's talk real globalism.
Yes, we have a very large Chinese community in Milan. There is a Chinatown. There is, of course, though, like I said earlier, there could have been a way to prevent all this if the seriousness of the virus was already announced by China, who should have closed down the international airport of Wuhan already in early January. This
it
was
seems like, they want to, if I think we have to include it in maybe on I can't remember the word, but the periphery of the conversation that maybe this is an intended thing to, the people who own everything, they need to get rid of a lot of us,
Yeah.
And I think they also take bets on which thing they do will reap the largest rewards. Let's put it that way. The most financial rewards. And, because we're food, I said that last week.
Yes, and Roseanne, there's another problem here, that it seems like this illness is really calibrated to affect a certain part of the population that in any way...
They say it's the collapse of the Silk Road and of all distribution channels. And so, that's something very, very serious, along with the fact that people are suffering and dying and they just collapse in the street. And people are trying to track whether they're incinerating bodies in China because, what are they going to do with all these bodies? They don't have time to bury them. So they're looking at dark clouds of, certain types of chemicals with Google Maps.
That was a sulfuric acid that apparently emanates in large quantities, like we said a couple of weeks ago with Lowell, I think, brought up this.
But there's still something. I always like to look at the bright side as if there is one here.
Mm-hmm.
But people like us they're not waiting to be told what's happening. They're taking it upon themselves to research and find it out in order to share it with their fellow and sister beings, humans. And I think that is so heroic. Something heroic has some new organ of heroism is evolving in us, I think. And also we'll figure out how things are really run. And when you mentioned the World Health Organization, where were they in Haiti? Where were they in Syria? I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
It's all so connected, and it's all just a tip of a big Ponzi pyramid. And at the top, what's another heartening thing is that all the worst criminals are easily identifiable because they sit at the top of every multinational corporation. And it's all at our fingertips to seize the means of every kind of production, and most importantly, of intellectual production. I think that's an evolutionary leap for the human being, and I'm excited about it and hold fast to the silver lining in every bad black cloud,
John, you seem to wanted to intervene.
First, I want to say bravo to Roseanne for the little piece in Gateway Pundit.
Thank you.
About you speaking directly to President Trump about Roger. Getting back to this whole problem with this virus, Dr. Francis Boyle was on Alex's show recently, and actually has been on more than one time, and he was the source for me in finding out what had been shared by the scientists in India regarding the specific targeting of the virus to Oriental males. Now, whether or not that's true or not, it could be a false flag that was thrown out to put people off.
John, it doesn't really fit with the whole thing.
Yeah, but it was said. And so if it's not true, why are they saying that? But in the second token, the other part of what they said was that they saw the marks of the CRISPR gene editing technology in the virus itself. So it's possible that this thing has a capability of morphing to be more widely dangerous than just Oriental males. We don't know. As far as this whole incubation period, that's also very, very problematic. And there's a tremendous number of Chinese.
But here, John, in Italy, there's no Chinese contaminated in northern Italy. These are Italians who, out of the blue, came out by going to a bar or by simply going to a hospital and doing their job. So the situation with patient zero is now actually, they thought initially there was a guy coming back from Wuhan who was at the center of it all, and now they have discovered that he's actually clear of everything and he couldn't be patient zero. So,
well, that leads in another possibility, is that they have more than one that has various targets. We don't know. And I'm just going to take refuge in the fact that I don't know. I'm just trying to find out what's going on.
And regarding the bioweapon hypothesis,
if they can target it to one sector, then they can target it to any sector.
And regarding the bioweapon hypothesis, today an important virologist in Italy said, no, it's impossible. We conducted experiments and studies, and we actually see that the origin is in the bat, and they went on with the bat hypothesis. Lowell, I think that probably you know already where I want to go from there, because of course there is bats in labs, even in biolabs.
I unmuted my mic. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Welcome.
I was told by my wife, and I also saw that some of the viewers said you're talking too loud. Oh. So I'm going to the other extreme, not to talk loud, but I want to make sure you can hear me.
Okay.
So I was thinking to myself, one of the Queen Victoria said to Disraeli that whenever a Gladstone spoke to her in private, Queen Victoria said, Gladstone always spoke to me as if he was addressing a town meeting. And I realized I'm doing that too. So I was thinking, why am I doing that? So I ran it through the Vulcan computer, and I came up with a conclusion. I was born in 1956 when the TV was coming online. In 1960, the Xerox, which the photocopy machine, which was called the Xerox, because that was the corporation, was invented. At the end of the 60s, came along the fax machine. And I realized, why are you yelling at the computer? And I came up with a simple conclusion. It took me years, and it's still hard for me to deal with electronic signals. I'm looking at a box, and I realized in the back of my Vulcan mind, I was thinking, if I don't yell loud enough into this box, that Leo in Palm Springs, Palo Alto, Palm Springs, and John in Detroit, and Reverend David William in London, and Roseanne in Hawaii won't hear me. Of course, that's not rational. But we have many brains, as that's a whole nother subject of discussion, the primitive brain, the reptilian brain, the left brain, the right brain. You take the high road, I'll take the low road, all the brains. So I'm going to attempt to go to the other extreme and not yell into this strange little box I'm looking at, through which we can have a conversation.
So your reptilian brain types in all caps?
Yes, that's right. That's yelling. That's right.
There's another kind of brain too, the unified brain.
Well, that's what we already work on, and that's actually one of the points I wanted to get to for our viewers and listeners, and also the bad guys out there, that the five of us represent a unified brain. We're going to tell you what we really think and feel, and as always, I like to start, and then I'll stop, because I wrote down all sorts of notes for today's program.
Sweet.
So let me start with just the beginning to place this where we are in the time-space continuum in terms of sacred time from here in Jerusalem. So, as usual, I want to wish all our viewers and listeners a good week, because the week here starts after Shabbat on Saturday night, Motzei Shabbat. I want to wish you all a good week from the land of Israel, city of God, Jerusalem, hill of the priests, overlooking the Temple Mount, where we hope that the third and final temple will be under reconstruction soon. And at some point, I will deal with the question you brought up last week about what in Christian theology is called an antichrist. I was thinking, what's the equivalent of that in the Tanakh? You might say Gog, the head of the armies of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel 38 and 39, this mysterious figure who comes at the end of days to lead the final assault. You might also say the man who exalts himself above God, spoken of in the book of Daniel, would be a Tanakh equivalent of what Christians would refer to as the Antichrist. So this is greetings to you all from here. It is Sunday, February 23rd, and because it's the evening, it's the 29th day of Shvat, 5780, and tomorrow we have Rosh Chodesh Adar, the new month, and I'll get into all the other stuff later, and we'll deal with I wanted to just deal with one issue, is not talking too loud. So now I'm going to defer to my colleague, Reverend David William, and I'll come back to some of the other things.
Unmute.
But I muted because I wanted to hand it over to... What? Oh.
Okay, we have Lowell, who is sneezing. I hope you're fine, Lowell. Don't sneeze too much, otherwise we're going to have to put the masks here. And then we have David William Parry in London. David, it's your turn, of course, to speak with our audience and give your side of things.
Well, I mean, firstly, I stand with you all, and I stand with you, Leo, regardless. And I think we do. We all represent a very diverse and united brain on this show. It's a unique show, and it's giving all sorts of, it's inspiring all sorts of bizarre comments. I mean, well, it's nice to have people supporting me. It's very odd for them to then start attacking Lowell, who is a friend.
Yes, I noticed there is a to take sides on this show, so it's.
I couldn't have been more flabbergasted. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
I guess it's a little bit like Roseanne's TV show, where each character had a different ideology, coming from a different walk of life, and then maybe some people prefer one character instead than the other. So, David, you are doing great, and as well as Lowell, of course.
Well, I mean, you're all giving me such food for thought, and you're all my new chums. And I find all that exciting, and I'm learning so much from all of you. I confess that I've had two problems this week. I mean, the entire show knows now I'm no techie, so I'm not going to use metaphors like Vulcan. I look at a laptop, it explodes, or it goes wrong, or I think I've pressed something and I've actually pressed something else. It must be a generation thing. I don't know. So, and proofreading. If I know what's in my brain, the trouble is, why isn't it in front of me at the same time? So that's something else, And also, I've been fighting minor ill health this week. I mean, the joy of getting older, on top of two insults. I promise I'll get to the point in a minute, Leah. Somebody said I was as ramshackled as G.K. Chesterton. Well, I thank you for the compliment, but there's acid behind that. I know there is. Right. Thank you. And somebody else, I sent you the picture, but it's probably such a sad show we won't be able to put it on. Somebody else, I can't believe, said I looked like Hong Kong Phooey. I mean, Hong Kong Phooey is a spaniel. He's a spaniel. He does martial arts for the police, and he's a spaniel. So I don't look like Hong Kong Phooey. It's not true. Right? In terms of, I don't know. I went to another minister's fraternal during the week. They all think I'm getting more naive as I get older. I was thinking of John's remark, some of his statements about engineered viruses. I just find that almost unspeakably difficult to believe, that people are so corrupt and sinful. I'm not saying it's not true. I just find it astonishing that anyone would even think that's a good move in their career. Oh, hi, darling. I'm home today. Yes, we engineered a new virus to attack 40-year-old Chinese people. I mean, what sort of joy must be in their heart? What sort of happiness must be in their heart? Yes, zero. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, London is a city of rumours, so either everybody's got it or nobody's got it. Obviously, this is a very serious problem which we need to deal with rationally. And I just pray for all the people that are inflicted. For me, it's opening up whole new vistas of human depravity, which I never thought existed. I mean, last week we were talking about the influences on our good Lord Jesus Christ. Yeah, I mean, he spent his career, as far reading between the lines, everyone can attack me, quoting the book of Daniel and quoting learned Rabbi Hillel, who was one of the leading figures of the Sanhedrin of his time. So obviously, Joshua Yeshua was very, very aware of what was going on around him and what debate was at that particular time. And the fact that he wants to say, look, it's love and it's goodwill that are important. Is that in your heart, and is that leading you to the kingdom? And I just find it astonishing. I mean, these people must have personal lives, surely. They must have children. They must have partners. How can you go home at night? I'll tell you what I'm thinking, Roseanne. A couple of years ago, I was invited to some Nazi camps. I was visiting some colleagues in Poland. And they said, well, look, since you're here, these are historic camps. You've got to come and see them. I didn't want to because I could never, I never know how to react appropriately. When it's man-made disaster. If it's human disaster, I know what to do. But if it's man-made, I don't know. And, I just went, I came away thinking, what? Yes, Hong Kong Phooey. Look, it's not me. It looks nothing like me. That is nothing like me. So everyone can see the insult, right? Anyway, but what is wrong with people? The ancient Jewish idea of original sin is deep and profound, and it's very unfashionable. But we need to reconsider it. Christians and Jews and Muslims, I think, are very aware that there's a crack in the shell, that human nature is flawed in some sad way. But we all need to look at it afresh. I mean, everything John says about these engineered viruses and everything Roseanne and Lowell says, it just terrifies me more and more. Are these the last days? I don't know. I'm beginning to pray that they are, because how much worse can things get when people are designing death and destruction to inflict wonderful countries like Italy and incredibly fascinating countries like China? And just to finish off, Leo, we've had the joy of developing 5 churches, probably 7 churches in Africa. They're frightened it's going to go in their direction. They don't really want to know what to do, as they're very, very poor. What to say to them. So, prayer is needed, and we need to remember our charity and our good hearts and good wills before this situation gets any worse. The Antichrist is among us. What does it mean? A state of consciousness which is against progress, beauty, truth, healing. The Antichrist is already here, whether it's an actual person or not. I mean, does that matter when there are people in the Department of Defense who plan ruthlessly to eliminate everyone who disagrees with them? And there are people in the Ministry of Defense as their lapdogs that just turn up and say yes to everything, Major General. We need to really think where we're going as a human race and what this means to all of our families and our descendants. I might be the openly gay priest, but I didn't drop out the sky. I've got a mother, I've got a family. This can't continue. We need to pray for each other and remember how low the human condition can sink before we remember how high it can ascend. That's me done for the minute, Leo. Deep sadness this week. Deep sadness. It's not the Italian way. It's not the Italian way.
Yes, it's not the Italian way. And while you were talking, of course, I muted myself, but I also was playing in the background this video, which is a video that surfaced on the net in the last couple of days, asking people to pray for Italy, for what is going on over there. But of course, we are also praying for what is going on in Iran, in South Korea, and everywhere else in the world, in China, affected by this terrible virus. Regarding China, though, we always go back to the same thing. They have put politics before the health of their own people. They have lied to their own people, and they have lied in the process to the rest of the world, utilizing basically the World Health Organization that they have corrupted for their own vicious game. And this is profoundly evil. So the fact that politics can be put in front of the health of billions, not even millions, billions of people that inhabit the planet Earth gives you an idea of where we are in the year 2020. And today, of course, Roseanne, we want to be talking also about our friend Roger Stone, which you have also asked very kindly to our president to pardon, which I hope he will do very soon. And please tell us what's your take on this, Roseanne.
Well, I was going to say to David, Lowell and I know a lot about a government that targets, isolates, and seeks the destruction of a particular group within it over 2,000 years in European history, and who also worked those people to death as slaves and gassed their children upon arrival, and then used their hair and their flesh for soap. So, David, we also know about women who were healers and were targeted and burned at the stake in Europe. 9 million is the estimation, and mostly widows. And so let's not go and say, oh, the world is in a terrible place and it's never been like this. It's always been like this. For the Jewish people, it's always been like this. But it's different now because we've come home. And so I look to, and I did want to say that it's not irrelevant that it starts in Ethiopia always, because that's a very important tribe of Israel, the people of Ethiopia, who have found their way to Israel now, thank God. But, you know, I have a very different view of history, and so does Lowell, than other people who aren't of our type, or whatever you want to call it. But this time it's very different because we have access to our faculties and to our ability to decipher truth and to speak it. And because of the internet, we can communicate it and reach each other. And we've never had that before. So I think that instead of saying, maybe we should destroy ourselves because it's so horrible, let's take maybe this last chance that we have and do things differently in a much smarter way. And I was going to say about one thing that I brought up in 2012 when I ran for president as a socialist was that, you know, the economic system, it's completely fixed. And, you know, they call it free markets, but that's still fixed. It's not real, actual capitalism, which is based on supply and demand. So it still isn't there. And I think that it could easily be, and I think Trump is working on this too. You have to factor in the true cost to the human community. And that's what's missing in capitalism, and why it never works and why it always collapses and then booms. We have to get rid of that. And we can get rid of that easily by laws that govern it and say no one should be able to No one should be allowed to profit from genocide in any way. And that would really change the economic system for the better. And no one should be allowed to profit from slave labor either.
Lowell, you wanted to intervene, then also Reverend Parry wanted to say something. Actually,
Yes, I want to add a footnote at this point about a subject I don't want to go into, but I'll just make a reference to it. I have no problem. First of all, I'm not watching the live comments because it would distract me from our conversation. I see the live comments when I review the program during the week after we've had it, as it would be too much information for me from too many sources all at once. But I have no problem with negative comments. Let me say what the reference is. As we've discussed privately, and I'll just give a little background. 40 years ago, in the spring of 1980, I audited a class at the Hebrew University given by Reverend Dr. Franklin Littell. He was a Methodist minister who died a few years ago. He was the chairman of the Department of Religion at Temple University. It was called The Christian Roots of Nazi Anti-Semitism. In the fall of 1980, he accepted me to his doctoral program in Holocaust Studies at Temple University. And I decided not to go into it because the subject matter was too negative. Now, as Roseanne knows, many people think autistic people have no feelings. The opposite is the truth. We have no filters.
Yeah, right.
Which means neurotypicals, what we call normal people, can edit out anything you don't want to see or hear, which is why some people can even engage in the most terrible crimes and sleep good at night. Mm-hmm. So what was my dissertation, the subject of my dissertation going to be? It was going to be the history of Christian Jew hatred. I don't like the term anti-Semitism, and what the churches did and did not do. We're talking primarily about the Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, and then state Protestant churches before, during, and after the Holocaust. The answer is, aside from the theology of genocide developed in the first few centuries by the church fathers, which started laying the tracks from the Gospels to the gas chambers, aside from some notable exceptions of people who actively resisted, and aside from large numbers of people who looked out for themselves and didn't want to risk their lives to help others, and I don't blame them for that, a lot of the leaders of the churches were saying, go Nazis, go. They're the Christ-killing kites and the deicide-murdering yids, and they're being punished for the crucifixion of our Lord. So I don't expect that after 1900 years of mass murder, mass torture, and mass vilification, where the minds of millions and millions of people were poisoned with theological Jew hatred and the art, the liturgy, the music, everything possibly think of. I'll give you one small example. Everybody knows Handel's Hallelujah chorus, right? Hallelujah, hallelujah. People think the Hallelujah chorus is about the resurrection of Jesus and his ascension to heaven from the Mount of Olives. But that's not what it's about. The Hallelujah chorus of Handel is about the destruction of the temple. Christians constantly had to confirm to themselves, we're right, the Jews are wrong, till today. So after 1900 years of pumping this poison, it changes into the hearts and minds of hundreds of millions of people, primarily in Europe, which is where the B'nai Yefet, the sons of Yefet, live. It doesn't go away. And as reality comes to the boiling point, as it is now with the last plagues of the final redemption, all sorts of stuff is going to come up and out. That's fine with me. I have no problem with that. I don't look at the live comments because they distract me. So you don't have to delete or edit whether the fangs start to drip with Jewish blood. There's a whole history for that with the Crusades and the Khmelnytsky massacres and the pogroms that's been going on for almost 2,000 years since Christianity became a Gentile religion and not just a sect within Judaism. That's just the reality. Most Christians don't know it. And in coming programs, I do intend to cite from two of my teachers, Reverend Dr. Franklin Littell, whose book is called The Crucifixion of the Jews, and who was a young student in Germany in 1938 during the Kristallnacht, and Reverend Edward Flannery, both of whom I knew personally, one of the first members of the board of the Root and Branch Association, who wrote, he was an Irish Catholic priest from Rhode Island. What was it called? His book is called The Anguish of the Jews, 23 Centuries of Christian Anti-Semitism. What I learned about this subject from Christian scholars, just as what I learned about Islamists from Islamic scholars. So let's put that on the side. I have no problem. You're dealing with a primal scream of fury against Jews and Judaism, which because of the Holocaust, where 5 to 7 million Jews were mass murdered, including 1.5 million children, it doesn't sound nice to talk about that. So you say Israelis are Nazis and they're persecuting the Palestinians. We don't like Zionists. Now let's leave to this. Well, let's leave to the side that it is hard cases make bad law. It is theoretically possible to be an anti-Zionist for religious. In my own synagogue, I said the Zionim, they don't like him either. But when you deal, the Jew hatred is bubbling to the surface in every mainline church. I think I sent you an excerpt of what Martin Luther wrote before he died on the Jews and their lies. And Hitler himself said, when the people would say, "What are you doing to the Jews?" He says, I picked it all up from canon legislation. What you legislated, going back to the first Pope Sylvester, just put into practice. And he praised John Chrysostom for his writings. So let's just leave that, because that's that which isn't going to go away. And in the next years, like the bones came up from the ground at Auschwitz that we were talking about a few weeks ago, thousands of them. All these bones are going to come up, and let's leave Jews on the side, and the millions of women murdered as witches, and the millions and millions of men and women until the Protestant Reformation who were murdered as heretics by the Roman Catholic Church, the Albigensians, until the Protestants got weapons they could defend themselves. Let's leave all of that. So I have no problem with negative comments. I've been dealing with them for 2,000 years.
Wait, but also, the war against the European people itself, more European people were killed than any other group way back.
Right.
When you look,
much more than the number of Jews. The Inquisition,
and for hundreds of years centered in Switzerland.
Right. The Office for the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith of the Roman Catholic Church is the new name for the old Papal Inquisition. And before they got to work on Jews in Spain, for centuries they were working on dissenters, non-Jews, who had heretical ideas. And as they tortured these people before they murdered them, where'd you get those ideas? I spoke to Moshe the butcher down the street. I got it from the Jews. Why don't we put them in ghettos where they can't talk to you? And then they got to work them in Spain. So the number, if you want to do a body count, the number of men and women murdered by the Roman Catholic Church before the Reformation dwarfs the number of Jews who were killed. But I don't want to deal with that now. I want to deal with later on the virus and Roger Stone and the other issues we meant to discuss. I just wanted to say that I have no problem with negative comments.
I would like to interrupt you and say one thing that I wanted to say a long time ago in this show.
These are some of the instruments, Rosie, that were used by the Inquisition, just to refresh the mind of the people who are viewing us.
Thanks.
Yeah, there's a whole Tower of London that displays the torture implements. I went and saw that. It's amazing. But, and they also recorded their emotional conduct, which we ignore that one. But that's how they came up with MK Ultra and all the other mind control programs. It was all started in medieval times, and it never stopped. But I want to say, when everybody talks about Antichrist, everybody says Antichrist, Christians say Antichrist. That is the same thing that I say when I say Erev Rav. they are the one and the same. So I want you guys to know that we have something in common there, and words are getting in the way. It's the Arab Rav, and they are what you call the Antichrist. They're the same thing. So
thank you for that explanation, Roseanne. And John, you seem to want to tell something. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, I love taking all this in. I'm not shy, and you'll get your chance. But yeah, I mean, come on, you can go back into the Old Testament, go and kill every man, woman, and child, and salt the land so nothing will grow. The whole idea of having pogroms against any particular population, I mean, it was very common amongst American Indians. It's still common amongst tribes in Africa. And there's this whole death cult that ceases to go away. And I think until one comes to an understanding of reincarnation and karma, and that's a central development within Christianity in our present time, it's hard to comprehend a great deal of this. I had a dream one time where I was being thrown into an oven at Auschwitz. And then I morphed, and I was the guy throwing the guy in the oven. And then it went into a vortex of light and exploded into love. And it was like, it was such a profound dream. It woke me up. And really the only solution to all this is love. And are there people within the history of Christianity that don't understand that? Absolutely. Are there people within Judaism that don't understand that? Absolutely. And everywhere else. That's the challenge that we've been put to through our Lord Jesus Christ. And when they asked him, how will we know them? He said, you will know them by their deeds. Again, I go back to, it isn't your theoretical relationship to belonging to some club or whatever. It has to do with what you do.
that's right.
I'd like to respond to that if it's all right.
Please, Lowell, please.
Thank you. In Jewish tradition, you have the written law and the oral law. Now, one of the ways in which the rabbis diverged from the church fathers was, while the church fathers took the criminal law literally, and they did away mostly for Christians with their ritual commandments, the rabbis did the opposite. They strengthened the ritual commandments and took literal commandments. I'll give you an example. It says in the Torah, if you find a city of idolaters, you'll kill them, men, women, and child. The rabbis in their commentaries said, there never was such a city. This is just a warning against idolatry. The church fathers did exactly the opposite. They said, that's exactly what we'll do. If you find a city of idolaters, we're going to kill them, every man, woman, and child. And in the 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648, that's exactly what the Catholics did to the Protestants, and the Protestants did to the Catholics, because each regarded the other as idolaters. And that is why the population of Germany went down 70% during the 30 Years' War. And when the Swedish armies went into Poland, the population of Poland went down several million. Let's take another verse. It says, if you find a sorceress, she will not live. Again, the same general prohibitions by the rabbis. Well, it just means sorcery is not so good. It was based on that verse as applied by the church fathers in the Roman Catholic Church that millions of women, we're not talking about some people, millions of women were murdered. Another verse, it says in the Torah, if you have a rebellious son, you can put him to death. Now, the Greeks and the Romans did that. In the rabbinic law, the oral Torah, and Jesus talks about that in Matthew 23, verses 1 through 3, where he says the scribes and the Pharisees sit on the seat of Moses. They're the authorized interpreters of the law. Therefore, everything they tell you to do, do. But don't get involved with hypocrisy because they don't do what they say. So the rabbis say, well, yes, it says that, but it just means you shouldn't really be rebellious, and the child's disrespectful. You have to have 5. They made so many conditions that it became almost impossible to put that into effect. Now let's deal with what the commentaries say. What did Joshua say when he went into the land of Israel? The Canaanite nations who were to be destroyed, and for what? Theft, rape, murder, and child sacrifice. Mass child sacrifice. Says you're not going to have anything to do with them. You're going to wipe them out because otherwise they're going to influence you. And even there, the rabbis say that what Joshua said to them was, you can leave, you can stay and accept that we're going to be in charge here as the Israelites, follow the Noahide laws, but if you fight, not taking any prisoners. And if you actually look at the books of the Torah, which you call the Old Testament, Jesus would never have called it that, you find that often the Philistines are talking to the Israelites, they're beating each other up, but nobody's wiping anybody out totally. I could go into more detail about that. So if you actually look through the whole Torah and the books of Kings and the wars of the tribes and the wars with the neighbors, in most cases, most people, they wanted to beat up the other guy and get tribute. They didn't want to wipe everyone out, men, women, and child. I've heard these verses referred to. So even then in the biblical time, with the 5 Canaanite nations that were to be subject to total extermination, these were not like the guys down the street who have different theology from you. The issue was, as it is today with the secret societies and the globalists, theft, rape, murder, and child sacrifice, cannibalism, torture, and rape, and then murder of the children. So the comparisons, well, there were some people in Christianity that weren't nice. I wish I could say that's true. I learned the history too well. It's not some people. It was institutionalized by the church fathers, and leave Jews on the side. It was put into practice for 1,000 years until the Reformation. Ask the Albigensians. There were no dhimmi people in Roman Catholicism, in the Roman Catholic world, like there were in Islam, where you pay your tribute, you can be Christians, you can be Jews, you're either a protected religious minority or a persecuted religious minority. There were no religious minorities. You were just dead. People can say Yazidis are mistreated in Iraq today, but that begs the question why there are any Yazidis. In the Roman Catholic world, up until the Reformation, there were no non-Roman Catholics. When Charlemagne was crowned head of the Holy Roman Empire in 800, at the church in Aachen, right on the hill over there, the Benedictines built an exact replica. I've been in it, stone for stone. When Charlemagne was crowned head of the Roman Catholic Church, and he said, okay, I'm expanding my empire. He went right into Germany where the Saxons are, and he and his priest said, you're going to convert to Roman Catholicism, we're going to kill you. And the Saxons, but we don't want to convert to religion. They killed them by the thousands and the thousands and the thousands. I know my history too well. I wish I didn't know it.
The same can be said also for the Muslims. I mean, they went into countries threatening the pagans to convert. Otherwise, they were chopped.
I don't want to romanticize the Muslim world, but in Roman Catholicism, there were no protected religious minorities. There were no religious minorities because you were dead. So what you're dealing with is 1,000 years.
Maybe because of the institution, which was the whole Inquisition, Lowell. That was a big problem that, of course...
Without any reference to Jews, what they did to each other. Absolutely. And then, one other point, and then I'll stop because we could go into a whole thing about this. The decision in 1648 was, okay, if your king is a Protestant, you'll be Protestant. Your king is a Catholic, you'll be Catholic. They did allow in Austria, my wife is from Austria, from the village of 700 people in North Tyrolean Alps. My relatives were in, going back 2 generations, Nazi German Wehrmacht. You could leave as a Protestant Austrian, go to a Protestant state or kingdom, and Catholics could leave a Protestant kingdom and go to a Catholic kingdom. Who got the short end of the stick? The Anabaptists. Nobody wanted them. And they were pacifists. Many of them became the early settlers in the colonies. and who came from the German kingdoms. And they were killed by both the Catholics and the Protestants. And some of their murderers wrote of their admiration for these people because they were willing to die for their faith.
In a nutshell, we need to say that institutions, religious institutions, have not always benefited mankind, because religion should be, first of all, primarily a concern of man and his relationship with God, not with a bunch of humans representing most of the time in an erroneous way God. Roseanne, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, but almost, Arab, it is the Arab Rav who instituted those things. And I just feel that it's very important to say that a lot of Jewish people who were forcibly converted then became the most vicious anti-Semites that ever lived.
And well, of course, we have also then the Sabbateans.
We have to include that the founder of the Jesuits was a converted Jew. And, we have to look at that because it's our history too. Our fight against
we go back to Roseanne, what we said in the past episodes. The worst enemy of the Jews are the Jews themselves.
Well, not the Jews, the Arab Rav.
The ones who have diverted from the path, like, for example, the Sabbateans, the Frankists, and the whole heresy that sprang out of...
The Arab Rav are anybody, any religion, who hates the Jewish God. And they hate the Jewish religion, and therefore they hate the Jewish people.
As we are reaching the top of the hour, I wanted, at least at the top of our first hour here with the PEW, I wanted to go back, of course, to the subject of Roger Stone, which yesterday is trying to move in an effort to have the whole thing acquitted. So he's trying to get this case basically dismissed, from what I have gathered. Roseanne, you have actually intervened officially in your capacity, and you have released a very powerful statement that was also published by the Getaway Pundit. I'm going to also show now on the screen
Well, I want to say that the Roger Stone trial reminds me of those Southern trials of, the KKK, where they'd have KKK members on the jury. So there was never a fair trial for the victims. People were set up, people were lied about, by the KKK leader of the jury. And that's exactly what happened to Roger Stone. It's very comparable.
So what do you think will happen to Roger? Will the president eventually pardon him?
Well, he has to. I think the sooner the better. I mean, I know the president said that there's a process and he's watching it go. And I guess that we all need to be invested in the process to make sure that it comes out right and that justice is served. But, it doesn't seem that justice is ever served to anybody who goes into those courts that are peopled and headed by, people who hate the president and anybody who likes him. I mean, that's exactly like, all the lynchings in the South. It's exactly that miscarriage of justice. Justice is supposed to be blind. And I mean, this is an overturning of all civil rights. And I just, it makes me angry that he's paying such a price while everybody else who is actually proven, wasn't messed with on a process crime, but actually lied to the American people about billions of things. They're walking around free. They lied to the American people about, Benghazi, and they're walking around free. They aren't even charged.
Roger, of course, is an enemy of all these people, all these libtards. John, we have in the past had many shows here on the Lyon Zagami channel in favor of Roger Stone, who has done nothing wrong. What's your take now on this attempt? I think that Roger is trying to get acquitted, and of course he doesn't want to get the pardon, maybe, or the president doesn't want to intervene until, of course, he has played all his cards. It seems like that's the case. No,
he has no cards. I mean, the guy is suffering. He's been under a witch hunt for, a couple of years now. How far does this go as we just sit here passively and watch it?
Well, this motion for disqualification, if accepted, would be probably even better than a pardon, because it will make Roger look probably better in the eyes of people who are highly critical. Of course, the moment in which the president will pardon him, Roseanne, the president will have...
Man, I mean, you have to talk about the wear and tear, the true cost to his life.
Yeah. Absolutely, and the way they arrived early in the morning with that whole show and CNN, it was just, it was just really the epitome of evil. And I have suffered similar things, and I can say it's not very nice to have the police early in the morning breaking through your door. John, please.
Yeah, there's so many good points brought up here that I have to cherry pick what's going to be most salient. And I think that what I want to do is point at the interview of George Webb that David Knight conducted just the other day. And George Webb has been there throughout the whole thing. He's been in the courtroom, and he's been paying attention, and he's a very smart guy, by the way. And the central point that he brings up is, why don't they bring Margaret Ratner into court to testify? It's suppression of evidence. She met with Julian Assange, and she was in touch with Randy Credico. And Randy Credico, there's a recording available of Randy Credico's reporting that he was the guy who was the connection to Julian Assange, and all of which is what Roger Stone based the comments that he made that he's been tried for. Now, this is just absurd beyond belief, but it's reality because these people live within the bubble. They're Washingtonians. They're almost to a man and woman, members of the senior executive service, and they have lifetime get out of jail free cards. And so, for example, the judge on the case, Judge Berman Jackson, it was a picture that Roger grabbed off of our associates, American Intelligence Media Associates, Americans for Innovation, a picture of her because he wanted a picture of her, and it happened to have a Celtic cross on there, a circle and a cross, which she interpreted as a gun sight, and that's when she put the whole thing on him, muting him, and he's not been able, because of his gag orders, to be able to comment on his own trial. So this is just a star court. This isn't a real trial.
And of course, parallel, we have what you're seeing now, which is demonstrations held in support of Julian Assange, which is also the primary victim who has been suffering out of all this. And there is a lot of people, as you can see, that in London are supporting Julian Assange. And we, of course, support Julian Assange ourselves, but the situation is definitely a very difficult situation indeed. I will ask Reverend David Parry, who is in London, how is the situation perceived right there, where Julian Assange is unfortunately held?
Gosh, I mean, the show is a medley of fascinating arguments and debates. It's hard to know how to focus on any of them. Let me take a step back to the previous conversation briefly. I'm interested in real religion as it's practiced not history books funded by government departments or universities. I know armies of decent Christians, men, women, and children, of priests, of nuns, of pastors, of preachers, that go about every day on next to no money, trying their best to make the world a slightly better place. I don't believe that's a new phenomenon. I believe that's happened all through history. Sadly, I do agree with Lowell and Roseanne that I was going to say the European world, but I don't know what that means, is anti-Semitic. I don't know what to say about that. But I will say, I mean, I'd have been one of the first people executed. I'm a gay priest. I'd have been one of the first people on the flames. And I write theology. My God, they'd have got me in 2 goes. So I'd have been a heretic as well. You know, for me, there's always been 2 churches. Now, this is me getting esoteric. You know, wasn't it? I think it was Speeches on Religion to Its Culture Despisers by Schleiermacher. You know, yeah, we can find so much wrong, but we can also find so much right. Let's accentuate the positive. The paintings, the buildings, the books, the attempts to make the world a better place, the Francis of Assisi's, you know, they are there. They are there. My worry is, I'm an evolutionist. You know, am I Darwinian? I don't know, but I'm an evolutionist. You know, our ancestors simply didn't know as much as we do. There we are. That's the end of it. And they had very different life patterns to us, life structures. And if your king said, I am this, that, or the other, you were too. And there was no discussion. You know, we tend to forget all these liberals came along and all these bourgeois people came along a couple of 100 years ago and said, well, we're not having it. You know, enough's enough. We're human beings too. But that simply didn't exist in the ancient world. You know, I don't like this modern habit with respect to everyone. I'm not aiming at Lowell. He's a knowledgeable man. I was thinking of one of the comments I read recently. You know, how can we blame a man of the past for the sins that he wouldn't have known about? Because they simply weren't in the intellectual framework of the time. You know, I was reading something about the slave owners during the week, and oh my God, let's tear down the statues of these American presidents. Why? They wouldn't even have thought that way. Maybe they should have done, but hey, they weren't 21st century.
I mean, that is completely insane. In fact, David, they will have to torn down all the statues of the emperors in Rome and everybody else that of course was involved in slavery in a time in which they didn't know any better.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
everybody, Leo. You know, I'm a great fan of Thomas Jefferson. He had feet of clay, and would he have been the man he is without his women? You know, probably not a deist, a man trying to do his best. No, I think we've got to stop focusing on what's wrong with things. I think negative
Well, we
power.
have to be able to speak truth. And we have to, because if we can't speak truth, which is history, then we can't pray right. Because you can't pray to God with a lie. You have to be able to pray to God in truth. So I think that it's just another signal of our evolving a new consciousness, you know?
Yeah, I agree. You know.
And go, oh, well, here's, you know, we're undoing it. We're weighing it and going, well, that wasn't very intelligent or just. These are good things that we bring into light. And,
I think I might have been misunderstood a bit earlier. I wasn't saying, isn't it terrible now that it's afflicting everybody and not just non-Jews? If one single human being has ever been badly treated or treated unfairly in any way at all, that is wrong. You know, and what is the church? It's a sexist, homophobic, elitist institution, I know. I've been on the receiving end of it most of my life, I know. And I started as a Congregationalist, and my heart is actually in free church. You know, I was accepted by the old Catholics, which of course are not Roman Catholics. And I was very honored by that. And I tend to say that because otherwise you end up with this whole sort of resume of you know, places and positions you've been in. No, I mean, the church is horrendous, but it's the promise of something good and beautiful and true as well. You know, and I think we've got to stop focusing on what makes us divided and what makes us limited and what makes us small and dark. And as a human species, try and see what makes us whole and light and better. And, that's really my position all about.
We have to face the fact that the human being, the human machine, it has some kind of a virus within it that is just programmed for self, annihilation, and we have to fix that. We have to fix it. We have to evolve past that.
Oh, I agree 100%. The Gnostics. I mean, I got involved with them too. What are they very, very good at? They realize there's something wrong, but they hate being pinned down. What is it? What is it? What is it? For the sake of brevity, for the sake of speed, I call it sin. But maybe it's much more complex than that. No, I agree. We must strive towards the true, the beautiful, and the good. And maybe even more than ever now, if these are the last days. Let me get back to Assange quickly. I've obviously always thrown me off the show. And Julian Assange, what a brave guy. People stand by him to a man. A man and woman in this country. The government, as usual, for its own ends, which most of the time I don't understand what Downing Street is trying to do or say anyway. But no, they're following a party line of a particular sort. I notice I've got one or two friends in the intelligence community here. I turn up at all these weird conferences because I've got an interest in Nicholas Roerich, the artist, the spy, the Central Asian. And they're convinced that really this is a vendetta against Assange more than actually anything else.
Well, it's definitely a vendetta from the military-industrial complex, more than any political institution.
Yeah, but just around
we have for freedom for a free press. He's all there is.
I would like to add something here, if it's all right. And I actually would hope that in the future that each week I'm reading what Leo, John, and David, you have Facebook pages. I see the new research you're doing each week. Leo on the Vatican, the Jesuits, the Freemasons, secret societies. I see what you, John, are putting out with the cat reports. And I see what you, David, Roseanne, you don't have a Facebook page, so this doesn't apply to you. I see what you, David, though every day I go to your YouTube channel and see what you're posting there. So you're putting
Facebook page, but
you do?
Yeah, but
So, and Reverend David, you're putting out the most remarkable posts on cultural developments in England and that are unique, and also Central Asia. I just want to add a small footnote here on something we might discuss in the future, is how the doctrine of religious freedom, that's not tolerance, was developed. And I'll just add a brief footnote about it here, because I learned these things. It begins in the Anabaptist wing of the Protestant Reformation. It begins to blossom in Calvinist Holland. The Puritans had to leave England, the Plymouth Brethren, because of religious persecution. They go to Holland, Leiden, I think, and from there they sail in those three famous ships, the Mayflower, the others. They sail to Plymouth. They were separatist Puritans. They didn't agree with the people over in Boston. And people forget that as great as they were, the founding fathers who went to establish a place of religious liberty for themselves in Massachusetts, did not want it for anyone else. When Quakers got off the boat in Boston and said, it's very nice, now go somewhere else. And the fathers of religious liberty as a doctrine are Roger Williams in Rhode Island and William Penn in Pennsylvania. And it's very important, it can never be read enough, what is their theological justification for the doctrine of religious freedom? This was and still remains for a great deal of the world a radical idea. It's okay to have what I may consider wrong ideas. Yes. And I'm not going to go to hell or be burned or stoned. Yes. That was something which people fought for. And it was established by William Penn, the Quaker. I went to a Quaker college outside of Philadelphia, Swarthmore, in Pennsylvania, which he called the peaceable kingdom. and had no fights with the Indians until the Scots-Irish came in, went to the frontier. They were Presbyterians. They thought the Indians are heathens. So that gave them an excuse to steal their lands. And then the fighting started. And then the Quakers said, but we're pacifists. But then they had said, but we don't have to be killed. They had a group called the Fighting Quakers. So some other time, it would be nice if we can discuss how the doctrine of religious freedom, that's not tolerance, is a big difference, was developed in the United States, and the principle of the separation of church and state enshrined in the Constitution is intentionally misunderstood by Amharatzin. No, then they would not understand because they'd be idiots.
Lowell, sorry to interrupt you and interrupt you all, because we have actually a phone call from one of our viewers who wanted to ask us some questions, so I want to bring him in. Welcome to the Pew.
Hello, thank you for having me, Leo. Thank you to everyone on the panel, especially Lau, for your recommendation to people like myself who've been a Christian my entire life to go back and read Revelation. I actually took your advice, Lau, and did do that. I've read it before, but I was extra careful this time, and I wanted to pay attention to some of the aspects that you had brought out in episode 5, and it's very convincing. Since then, I've decided to study the Talmud and other Hebrew texts. I'm very, very interested in Jewish culture now, more so than ever, also because of Roseanne Barr's testimony. So now that I've got that out of the way, I do have a question for Roseanne. Now, you've hinted that you're writing a book currently. I don't know if you're able to do so or feel like doing so, and if you don't, that's fine, but I love you. Either way, your answer is going to be fine. Can you give me any tidbit of info on what it is that's coming out on your pages?
Well, I always write about God. It astounds me that nobody seems to get that ever, but it's on every page of all 3 of my books. I always write about my relationship with God, and it deepens over my lifetime. You know, it gets deeper and more real and more physical in my body. And so this 4th book that I'm writing is about God in the body, in my body, feeling God rather than believing in him or any of that, but feeling it. So thank you for asking.
Thank you for your question. And of course, we will invite other viewers who are interested to call in at 970-577-6369 number +1 for calling outside from the United States. Thank you very much. And please continue. Whoever was on at the moment interrupted Lowell, then there is also John who wants to talk.
Well, I just to conclude that the idea of separation of state and church and state meant no state church. That's all. The founding fathers couldn't have imagined a world not filled with a belief in whether you were a Christian or a deist, a supreme deity and a moral order. They took theology very seriously. And they, as William Penn himself wrote, he said, the basis for my doctrine of religious liberty is the Noahide covenant and laws. Now, I know there are Christians that say, oh, but what about the prohibition of idolatry? That means if there's a world run of the Noahide covenant and laws, then all the Christians and the Buddhists and the Hindus are going to be murdered. This is complete nonsense. Any scholar such as John Selden and Hugo Grotius, the great Christian jurists of the 15 and 1600s, and William Penn himself knew exactly what they were talking about. These were people who could read and write in Hebrew, unlike me. And they were much very, very close. There were certain wings of the Reformation and certain great Catholic scholars who really, that's a whole nother subject. But remember, separation of church and state only means no state church. Don't let the ACLU or any other phony baloney organization tell you otherwise. Either they don't know what they're talking about, or worse, they do, and they're mixing up things. I'll give you one more example. A Plymouth Plantation was written by John, the first governor, Richard Bradford of the Plymouth colony, wrote, a account of their first years in Plymouth. One of the things that the New World Order globalists have done in their incarnation as the Anglo-American oil and banking establishment is in the edited versions put out of Richard Bradford's Of Plymouth Plantation, they edit out all his theological comments. They don't want you to know about that. They want to lobotomize your brain and your soul. Now, John Barnwell, these are subjects, he's a real scholar of American history and intellectual history. They edited it all out. And I have one suggestion for everyone, how to break the satanic matrix and mind control, which they're very successful to before they turn us into food like in Soylent Green or exterminate us to replace us by robots. And they do intend this. A very simple way. And their Jew hatred is, how do you break the matrix? It's very simple. Observe Shabbat in a simple sense. Once a week, turn off all your technology. Your smartphone's a dumb phone. Turn off all the screens and go for a walk for 3 hours. That will very powerfully be connect with other people. Don't go out to dinner and look at your stupid little box. Connect with nature. If you have no nature, walk through the slums, wherever you are. That they hate Shabbat. They don't want people to have time to think. They want you working 100 hours a day, 100 days a week, drug you, dumb you down, dope you up with junk food. They know exactly what they're doing. The battle that's being fought here is an intergalactic, multi-dimensional battle at the end of days. The people at the very top of the food chain on the other side know exactly what they're doing. And my message to them is the five of us represent that God spoken of in the first sentence in Genesis. And the correct way to translate it is not the way you've been told. It's not in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. It's in the beginning the unnamed God created the Elohim, the celestial powers, the heavens and the earth. That's who we represent. And when we put five of us together, when we speak and we're fighting, this is a real fight between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. So it doesn't even matter that John is a Steinerian Christian and Leo is, I'm not even sure what to classify you, and David is a Valentinian, and Roseanne is a high priestess of Kabbalah, an old man with autism in Jerusalem. We represent the supreme power. And therefore, in the battle with Satan, his demons and fallen angels, and your earthly servants, serfs, and slaves, we win because our God created your fallen deities. And we've come to the point in history where you have two choices. You can repent or not. There's no escape. One final point. Virginia Giuffre, the victim of Jeffrey Epstein, we had an exchange today. She wrote
Scoop.
What I say? Okay, I'm reading it verbatim. Virginia Giuffre, who I follow on Twitter, wrote, quote, "Today I am going out with my wonderful hubby, ... love you, Robbie." So I saw that, and I wrote her the following message. God of Israel bless you, Virginia. Shalom from Jerusalem, Lowell. She liked it. So I added another comment. And I know our show's being listened to. I'm going to read it to you. Virginia, vengeance will be taken on all those involved in the Epstein network. No one escapes this time. No criminal is safe anymore, including right here in the land of Israel, Lowell.
That's right.
And I mean exactly what I said. You can't escape. And any of you who were involved in these crimes, you think you can hide? Forget about Nazi bases in Antarctica. Right here in Israel,
we still have
you can't.
We still have her madam Ghislaine that apparently is in Israel.
She's not a madam, and she's not a socialite. She's a satanic slut. And her father's name wasn't Maxwell. It's a whole different name, just like George Soros is Schwartz. And my message to them is you have two choices. You can repent or not. You don't even escape in death, because the moment you leave your physical body, you go to the heavenly court. You don't even escape there. It says in Daniel chapter 12, many who sleep in the dust will arise, some to eternal glory and others to eternal damnation. And as our sages say, if you're resurrected to be for the Nuremberg trials that weren't finished with Mr. Rockefeller, whose Standard Oil Corporation was selling oil to Nazi Germany through fascist Spain and simultaneously overcharging the US Navy for oil. You think you escaped when Senator Brewster had his hearings in 1942 about trading with the enemy, and Senator Truman came out and the journalist said, are you saying Mr. Rockefeller is engaged in treason? And Senator Truman said, yes, what else would you call it? You didn't even escape in death, because as our sages say, you will be resurrected, put on trial, and then your bodies and your soul will be destroyed forever. So my message to anyone is, I don't care who you are, where you are. You're in the Mossad, you're in the this, you're in the that. You think you're God's gift to humanity, or a man God, or a master of the universe. You know what you really are? You're animated excrement, a coprolite. Because all of us in the bodies we're in now will live 70 or 80 years. Very soon, that the curse will be removed. People will start to live for hundreds of years, and then thousands of years, and then forever. It's all in Isaiah chapter 65, verses 19 through 21. But at the moment, let's say you live till 70 or 80. You're David Rockefeller and you have 6 heart transplants till you're 102 to keep your worthless soul alive a little bit longer in your shriveled body.
I think has recently died, and thanks God that he has left this world.
He did. So my message to Virginia was, I'm disgusted and disgraced that after what happened to you and your mistreatment, and you, Professor Dershowitz, there's no excuse for you. Yeah. You should be not able to practice you should be removed as a professor and present yourself as the victim. I've listened to what Lyon Nation has said. It's a disgrace that no Israeli self-help Hadassah women or the other group said, you know what, girls, we're really sorry what happened to you. And we know that some Jews were involved in this. Why don't you come as our guest to Israel? Since no one else was going to do it, I sent her a message today. And that not only, you should know everyone isn't like that, but that it's about justice. Simon Wiesenthal was asked, why are you doing what you're doing? So I can see that there's justice for those that didn't have it. Some with the girls, anyone involved in this, it's all going to come out. People don't understand what President Trump and the Patriots, so it's not about nationalism versus globalism. It's between those who believe in God and a moral order and those who don't.
Somebody said, what did the Dershowitz do? They don't know about the connection between...
I'll tell you what, when there was...
He kept his underwear on, though. He kept his underwear on.
In 2000, aside from...
Are you sure of that, Roseanne?
That's what he said. He said, yes, he did get a massage from an underage girl, but he kept his underpants on. So it's okay then.
We at the Pew, for all of you out there, friend and foe, we're angels of God in human form. We have extraterrestrial powers. And I'm telling you right now, no one escapes in this world or the next. You can repent. Not this time, because this is it, according to our teachings. No one escapes. No one escapes. We are here to defend widows, orphans.
We have John that has been...
I'm almost done. From bullies, cowards, and tyrants, and I don't care whether you're Jew or a Gentile, no one escapes. And I like what you did, Professor Dershowitz, and don't present yourself as the victim. It's okay. The big Jewish ego and the big Jewish mouth are fine. And Ben-Gurion said to Truman said, I'm the president of 200 million Americans. And Ben-Gurion said, I'm the prime minister of 2 million presidents. That's cute. That's funny. Not when you're dealing with rape and murder and child abuse.
You know what? Q said that they're saving Israel for last, because you know how many pedophiles went to Israel to escape death here in the United States? It's appalling. It's really good though that we're on the hunt, because we're not going to stop. And if we do stop or are stopped, there's a billion more people that'll do it, I hope. Yeah, John, let John talk.
John, you have the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, John Barnwell for American Intelligence Media, former manager of Mayflower Bookshop, here for you from Detroit.
I have to run just to stand still in this company. And it's an honor to be here with all of you. I was on the phone the other day with Julianne Davis, who was in the movie Eyes Wide Shut. And she was the woman who was dying. That was a really odd circumstance. But sometime we can go over some Eyes Wide Shut stuff, because I have my own stories about the real thing. But in any event, what we discussed was the lack of moral substance. And that's the real issue, and all these other trappings about which club you're belonging to, because I know good people that self-proclaim themselves as Democrats, that just because they don't see through the gossamer to see that it's actually a large corporation that wants to tell you everything that you're supposed to do and not do. And likewise, there are those types of figures within the Republican Party, and so we can go on in this church and that. You brought up the Plymouth Brethren. Aleister Crowley was raised a Plymouth Brethren, and it was his deciding to proclaim himself the Antichrist was in opposition to his parents, So everybody's still contending that they're having an argument with their parents. And last week, somebody asked, well, what name do you call God? And I think the one name that we'll all agree with on this diverse panel, even though I will not say it in perfect Hebrew, Ia Asher Ia. I am the I am, or I am that I am. And it's the whole concept of being an individual human being that's at the core of this. And we keep wanting to foster off responsibility onto somebody else. And the whole principle of the scapegoat, and Azazel, as it's called in scripture and in Islam also. Mind you that he hit me back first, It's like the way you see it with little kids. But you have to realize that the Crusades didn't happen until the Muslims had attacked Europe more than 500 times. And so there's always going to be plenty of information that we can all come up with. And we got a powerful group of people here, probably most of us either spectrum or on the verge of it. And so consequently, we do leave no stone unturned. But I have an abiding respect for everybody here, and I think that I'm here to find the commonality, the universally human, as Rudolf Steiner would describe it, because it's going to be the universally human aspect of humanity that redeems Earth evolution as a whole, and it's not through retreating into any particular tribe, group, club, religion, whatever. In the end times, it's what you do and not what your theories were about what you did. To sin, it means essentially, translated from the Greek, means to miss the target. And geez, I do that every day. But fortunately, I have a relationship to grace, and I have powerful friends like Father Solanus Casey here, who can speak for me, were he here, although he would probably criticize me deeply. But he was a Capuchin, as was Leo's mentor. And so there are certain people within the church that still hold the banner of Jesus Christ with honor, and likewise in all these various confessions. And And we all have agreed before that the source of many of the problems that the children of Israel have had is because of their own members in the labor Zionist camp being the initial prosecutors of the Jews, essentially, or helping bring it about in Germany. So, yeah, there is all of this sordid history that you've after a while you can become numb to the reality of that. It all boils down to how we treat each other.
Thank you, John. Very well said. You really delivered a powerful spiritual bomb in a nutshell. And Roseanne,
here's a good way to say that. My teacher told us that the problem with humanity is that we have hatred for no reason. But when that's replaced with love for no reason, we're going to be in, a massive evolution of the spirit. And I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, and I think that the PEW and our glorious panel has definitely delivered in its first 6 episodes an experimentation of things to come, on how things can be done in a different way, without really prevaricating over each other, and putting through each one our own way of being and our own view of life, but integrating it all together very well, I think. Roseanne?
Yeah, I think so. We found a way to speak to each other, but I didn't address the subject of Jesus, and I really want to do that in a subsequent program, because I think people need to really know about Jesus, who was a Jew like me and like Lowell, very much like me, into the oral tradition. And what he did that made everybody so mad at him was to take the oral tradition and teach it to the women in the streets. And that's why he was a revolutionary. And there's a whole Jewish history of Jesus ignored and smeared. And I don't think that, I think that he needs to be elevated in everyone's mind. He isn't just what Christians say he is. He's much larger than that. And I think that his Jewish history needs to be heard. And I want people to hear it, because it's very healing between Jews and Christians, for Christians to hear it and for Jews to hear it. No Jews know it. Hardly any Jews know it either. But I think that it's very integral. Is that how you pronounce it, John? Integral to our evolution as a united mind.
Now, there is, of course, a member of the Jewish community which is very talked these days. He's been nicknamed Mini Mike, and he wants to take over the world, but nobody really is listening to him, and he's becoming increasingly frustrated. And it's the example of how to have 60 billions and zero charisma. Now, which is your idea of Mini Mike Bloomberg? Let's start with John.
Oh, President Trump could be so funny. Yeah, Mini Mike Bloomberg, he posted on Twitter that Trump cheats at golf, and Trump responded with Mini Mike cheats at mini golf.
I mean, it's pretty incredible. Right? I mean,
if we don't have levity, we're all sunk.
Yeah.
And another thing that Trump really said to, I think he was in Las Vegas, he said that to Mini Mike. He was addressing it to Mini Mike. Isn't it hard to do what I'm doing? Because, I mean, you can only feel the pressure once you put yourself in front of all the people. I mean, Bloomberg has not really been in front of a camera delivering interviews or doing public appearances for years. And
did you see him at Subway? Did you see the video where he goes to Subway?
No, I still haven't seen this great piece. I will actually pick it up now, so maybe we can see it together. But I mean, it's quite obvious that the guy doesn't have that animal magnetism, as Mesmer used to call it. No, David. I mean, either you have it or you don't have it. It's something that some people just don't have. Even people who are very successful, maybe as in their businesses. But what do you think about it, David?
Oh gosh, I mean, who?
Mike Blomberg.
Mini Mike. I don't know. I went to was it Disney World or Disneyland in Florida many years ago, and there was an uncharacteristic deluge on the day, and I found myself stood next to Mickey Mouse and had a quasi-religious experience where I couldn't, forgive me, Bruno, but bloody hell, that's Mickey Mouse. I mean, Mini Mike, who are these people? Why don't they just shut up and go away? Get a life, get some real ambition behind you, man. Go and get a delivery truck or something. Stop.
What do you think Roseanne is really driving a guy who has everything to go on stage and be insulted by a bunch of politicians who you probably despise for your whole life? I mean, what drives you with 60 billion in your pocket to even do that?
I think that it's
is he into S&M?
I wonder that. He's a weirdo for sure, but look at the people that have come out backing him. Clint Eastwood just backed him, Judge Judy. I mean, but then you look at, like, if we're talking about Jewish people, and Bernie. Okay, crazy Bernie and Mini Mike are representing the Jewish people. And, that's a little bit disturbing on both sides there. But, it's kind of weird because both of them are, I hate to say golem again, but they are. They're like, they're inventions of Americans' assumptions about Jews.
And they will not really help Israel as much as Trump. They will not really help the Jewish cause as much as Trump.
No, I mean, Mini Mike he's an embarrassment. He's just an idiot. I don't know what he's doing. But I love seeing him at Subway. He was standing next to two African-American women, and he'd never seen anything like them either, and the sandwich. It was all too new to him to be actually speaking to Black women and ordering a hoagie. It was like, wow, it's all a new world for Mike.
What's that other Jewish word? Dibuk? Dibuk? The living dead? Dibuk, is that it?
Sort of phantom, but I think of them as being, where you conjure up a being that represents the very worst things that you could think of about a particular group, and both of those guys are that. Yeah. I can't believe in and Americans
have actually shown
the American left is so rooted in anti-Semitism that they actually think Bernie is a good guy, a good Jew. And he said the other day that he's very proud of being Jewish. He's on the front lines of trying to destroy Israel and the Jewish people there. He has no problem with the fact that 1 million Jews from Arab countries were expelled and went to Israel, and that Israel is 60% brown. American Jews don't know that. They think that everybody in Israel looks like them and talks like them and is leftist like them. They have no concept of it. And so, those two guys are the big mouthpieces for American Jews. It's really weird. It's weird to see it.
We still have 18 minutes before the end of the show. I will, of course.
Mike Bloomberg is just like he has more money, they say, than the bottom 125 million Americans. I mean, I'm a capitalist too. I believe in like actual capitalism that's based on supply and demand, and not all these other things that they throw into it, like paybacks.
I would like to know how he made this money. Lowell, you, of course, are always the guy who knows where the money comes from. Where does this money, Bloomberg?
I think there should be a maximum wage. I really do. And I think that it should be $100 million. I think that there should be a maximum wage for individuals, because all of that money is gotten from like not paying people their fair wage. That's how he gets it. That's how everybody gets it, from speculation and theft.
Like Jeff Bezos. But Lowell, where does this initial money, Bloomberg?
I was away. I had to go to the men's room. Nature was calling, and so that's why. And I really had to go. So,
are you sure it was the men's room?
What?
Are you sure it was the men's room?
No, it was
Well, actually, in our synagogue here, we have separate. But I'm sorry to say, if you take the highway to Haifa, and I was shocked. I went to the bathroom and I saw ladies and men in it. I don't think that's right. But let's leave that. So, with the time is so limited, I want to add a point here, and I've made it before, and I'll never stop making it. That we are, before I deal with Michael Bloomberg and Bernard Sanders, that we are 12 tribes of Jacob Israel. And what's going on now, as I understand it, and what will John Charles Lincoln Hulley always told me, you can't take on the Rockefellers, the Watsons, the Fords, and the big boys. They will just kill you in the Anglo-American establishment. The only way they can be taken down is one day, and John died in September 2014 at the age of 92. The only way is when the tribes will regather. What did he mean by that? He meant the 12 tribe nations, as he understood it, were primarily Judah in the land of Israel and the Anglo-Celtic, Bible-based, Protestant capitalist democracies of Australia, New Zealand, Canada, what's the core of the United States, and England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. Yes, I know Ireland is Catholic. He said only when they will unite under non-Erev Rav leadership, people like President Trump, that you will have the physical, economic, political, military, and most importantly, spiritual power to take on these guys. That's what's going on in Washington. This is not a battle between Democrats or Republicans or liberals or conservatives. Those terms are meaningless. This is literally a battle between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. And how do I define the sons of darkness? Not someone who has a different theology from me, whatever that may be. The sons of darkness are people, the Trump and the Patriots are going to take down, expose, and that's why they're freaking out. In Satan City, and this is, let's leave aside Billy Sunday and Elmer Gantry and all of that. We're talking about networks in Washington and New York and London, in Rome, it's global, that are engaged in theft, rape, murder, child abuse, and rape, murder, torture, sacrifice, cannibalism, and going back to the old Dionysian cults. And that was what God told the what?
Babylon.
Babylon, yes, Babylon. This is the battle between, and that is why Q, they are educating, and you, Roseanne, were on Red Pill 78 last Sunday. It was wonderful.
Thank you. I love that. I love them all.
They're educating the public slowly. So let's look at Israelites. We have 5 Israelites right here. Leo Lyon Zagami. The name Zagami is from a Jewish family in Sicily. Is that right?
Well, of course, we have evidence that in the land of the Zagamis, there is actually a Jewish cemetery in the island.
Right. Okay. Now you have other. Before we look that up, because Sicily is a great big yeshiva.
Everybody's a Jew. Here's the bad news. Everybody's a Jew, except
now John Barnwell is Irish.
The Erev Rav are the only ones that are not Jews.
Okay, Reverend David William Parry is Welsh, and your ancestor wrote England's second national anthem, Jerusalem, with the words of William Blake. I mean, I'm not, as Timothy said, don't hide your light under a bushel. And Roseanne comes from the most distinguished Yeki Lithuanian, am I right? Lithuanian family, super high.
From North Africa. And then we got kicked out there, and then we ended up in Lithuania.
Okay, wow. Now let's go back for a moment, and then I'll conclude because we have so little time left. The people who the world sees, who have I don't even know what the word is, say, I'm a Jew. You know what? This is one time when I hope David Icke is right about reptilians. I hope you're really reptilians. You have nothing to do with us. You come from another planet. You're descended from amphibians or frogs. You really, or Idumeans or Khazars, and you really have nothing to do with us. Because it's bad enough, it's cute, it's funny when you have characters out of a Mordechai Rickless or Philip Roth novel and the scenes in the bar mitzvah scene in Goodbye Columbus. That's cute. It's fun to be vulgar. There are worse things than being vulgar. So you have people in Hollywood, and they open their big mouths, and the way they, and people in Washington, the way they act. YouTube channel was closed down because they called the attacks on President Trump a Jew coup.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the fact is, we have an expression in 1930s. The little first generation American comes home from and says, "Grandma, the Yankees won the World Series." And Grandma says, "Moishe, that's wonderful, but is it good for the Jews?" Elliot Engel, Adam Schiff, Jerry Nadler, Charles Schumer, Rob Rosenstein, Epstein, Weinstein, Rosenstein, all the Steins, Barbara, all of these people. No, Grandma, they're not good for the Jews. They have nothing to do. They may be genetically Jews.
We
they have nothing to do with the authentic faith of Israel. So and the schlemiels and suits at establishment Jewish organizations, which don't even have any members anymore. The ADL, which is now not the ADL, it's the Anti-Defamation League, is the Obama Defecation League, where the head of it was one of Obama's step and fetch it house nigger court Jews. That maybe 2 generations ago they had members. They don't even have members. They live on wills, bequests, and estates. They're not real. And they have the nerve to say we represent Jews.
As the ADL is very powerful, if you want to find Lowell, he's in Jerusalem.
My parents are life members. Don't open your mouths to me. My parents,
you sound like my grandma.
Life members of that organization, when once maybe it did something. No, you're not powerful. You have no power. You have big mouths. And that whole world, and the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a Southern offshore asset center, these are money laundering operations. I feel sorry for the Gentile world out there. I feel sorry for the God of Israel, that his name is represented by such people who have nothing to do with authentic. What?
I'm starting the
shameless
promotion time. Guys,
what?
Get ready for the shameless promotion time.
Okay.
Here we are. A lot of books.
Oh, I gotta go get what?
From the mighty authors of the pew, we have Reverend David Parry with his latest Mount Athos inside him. I don't know. You describe what is this book, Reverend?
Mount Athos inside me is a study of the creativity and cultures generated by the Greek peninsula. It's actually Greek. It became a symbol of Russian identity, but I don't quite know how. Monasteries have proved to be this incredible source of inspiration to the arts, prose, poetry, drama, painting. The monks, basically surrogate Gnostics, right? I'll never get invited there now, but there we are. And it's this incredible resource for spirituality and creativity. I've tried to explain that there's an intimate link between both of them. I've used Swedenborg, that unlikely seer, as my guide literally throughout the text. And I'm trying to revive the depth of European arts and radical tradition. My new book will say more about that, because I think this is a time for radical tradition. Let's take the best of the past, but adapt it to free our hearts and minds in the future ahead. I just need to say one thing, Leo, to the people that were talking about G.K. Chesterton. My plays are much better than G.K. Chesterton's, and if I get the funding, they'll be playing in 10 times more than his theatres ever did. I will see you, sir, on the hustings. There we are. Thank you, Leo.
You got me inspired. I think I'm going to get into writing a play myself this year. Roseanne, please come forward with your own book of the
Well,
maybe books. I don't know.
I forgot my books.
Okay. You forgot.
I moved residency, and I have my books at my other house. But anyway, here's a good book that I want to talk about sometime here, and this is called Jesus in the Talmud. And so that's why we really, I've made it my.
You're really promoting this book.
Well, I'm sort of autistic too, and I really got, focused on theology and especially about Jesus as a fellow Jew. And so I really do want to talk about that. And we call it unredacted Jesus. But that is a wonderful book if you know how to decode Europeanism, which is what I call it. But, there's a whole bunch of good books besides mine. But I have 3 books on Amazon, and they're all about God. They're all heavily coded because I was doing television shows. Let's say they were a little bit cryptic, hermetic, because you couldn't be so direct when you were doing Well, also you want people to understand, and I think that my gift from God, if we're going to talk about gifts from God, was God gifted me with the ability to translate esoteric things into everyday language, and so that's what I did in all my books. My first one is called My Life as a Woman. Then I wrote a book, My Lives, and I am kind of horrified about that book because on the cover is me and my ex-husband, the late Tom Arnold. But my third book is called Roseannearchy, which is about internal integration by the grace of God.
Okay, so, because today we are actually transmitting also on my Italian channel, I would like you to give a message of hope to the Italians that are really in trouble today. A message to them of hope from Roseanne Barr. Un messaggio di speranza, as they were saying, as they were following us from Italy also today.
I would say that another way to break the matrix of fear and hatred is very simple, and it is to feel the emotion of empathy for other people and to nurture that inside of yourself. And the Italians have, I love Italy, and I have visited there for extended periods of time, and love the Italian people. And oh my God, they have such great empathy and feeling for other people, for the stranger, for each other, for beauty, art, truth, wonderful food. And I just thank you for that, and praying for you and your entire country and the world too. Let's find more of that, and may that help guide and walk us through terrible times.
Thank you so much. Grazie Roseanne Barr. Un messaggio di speranza per I nostri telespettatori italiani. Lowell, you also have a book.
I feel I've talked too much and overused, and I found I was yelling again, and this I couldn't blame on thinking you're too far away.
The beginning of
I just become like Gladstone, like the Queen Victoria said to Disraeli when Gladstone would talk to me like he was addressing a town meeting. Also remember, the whole issue of anti-Semitism in the church only came up because I understood from what you were saying that someone wrote something in the live comment section. You were afraid I'd be insulted. So I brought that up to say, there's nothing anyone can say in your live comment section that will insult me after what I know about the last 2,000 years of the history. And yeah, it's true what John's.
I'm going to tell my wife, who is in charge at times of editing out maybe comments that are not so nice, to just leave it.
You have to decide. If people use curse words, I can understand it, but I have no problem. People should let a man speak truthfully to his neighbor. That's what Zechariah says, because you can't solve any problems if people can't say what they think. So you want to know my book. Okay, I have one book 10 years ago, Cracking the Qur'an Code, God's land, Torah, and people covenants with Israel in the Qur'an and Islamic tradition, written under the supervision of Islamic scholars. And as I've said before, all the problems between Jews, Christians, and Muslims, between Ishmael and Isaac and Esau and Jacob can be resolved. The key is simply to understand that all the negative references to Jews and Israel in the Quran, the Greek Testament, and the Tanakh are legitimate objections to when God's chosen people don't act the way we're supposed to. But all three books, read in the right way, affirm the land, Torah, and people covenants with Israel. The moment that's understood, the problems become resolved. So my book was written primarily for Muslims under the supervision of Muslim scholars. Why? Because Muslims take their religion seriously. And in order, you have to say, okay, so show me why I should accept that you should have some sort of an entity in the land of Israel. Really, it says that? Yeah, he gave my book says that, and according to my commentators, and that you would be Surah 17, verse 104. He'll bring you back from all the 12 tribes at the end of days. Yeah, it really says that. Okay, we have something to talk about. When you're dealing with people who take their ideas seriously, whatever their ideas are, and one wants to make policy, you better know what those ideas are. People are willing to live or die for their principles, even the worst ones like Wahhabis. You better know that torture and death is not a disincentive for people who want to die. That doesn't work with them. You have to convince them why the ideas are wrong. And there are other ideas. And why Wahhabis, for example, aren't Muslims. Simple reason. Wahhabis believe God has a body. They try to keep it secret. Christian would say, who cares? We believe Jesus had a body. And Mormons believe God the Father had a body, which actually reads them out of classical normative Christianity. It's just another religion, actually based in Freemasonry. But ideas are important for people who base their actions on ideas, whether it's Nazis or anyone. You want to know what the ideas are. Then you have to convince them that if they take ideas seriously or their faith seriously, why say, oh, yeah, it really says that? I didn't think, show me that verse. And my commentator, okay, I'll just conclude with what we did in the 28 years we've been here. We came right before the Oslo death process began. There was a planned demolition of Israeli society by the New World Order globalists. It wasn't an accident. Right.
Exactly.
It wasn't a failed peace process. Our girls didn't go to school. They were the age of 2 and 1. They didn't go on the buses. The buses were being blown up. We didn't have a car. So we took a taxi service. Which did we use? They came on time and they didn't argue about the price, was Hadar. And Hadar had mostly Arab drivers. So my wife and I did the taxi driver test, which was what? We would ask the Arab taxi drivers, we know that it says in your Quran, first you read my Quran? Wow. We know that it says that God gave the land of Israel to the Jews and will bring us back at the end of days. What do you think was the response of the taxi drivers? It's a loaded question. In every single case, with one exception, they said, oh yeah, that's right. You know that too. Why don't your leaders say that? Why? Because they're a bunch of schlemiels and low IQ morons. They're not monsters. They're just dumb. So the Arabs were saying, yeah, we know that. Why don't your leaders say that? And forget about it. They just are not able to think outside of the little gefilte fish containers. So that's what my book was for.
The object of why we have freedom of religion is because it's freedom of thought that we're talking about. Freedom of thought. Without that, there's no human spirit.
Amen. Amen.
Guys, I forgot as usual to unmute. I'm getting to the end of the show and I'm getting loose on the unmute button. So,
John, you were meditating.
Yeah, well, of course, there is actually. I was following the debate that is raging there on the comment board, so I got a little bit sidetracked. John, please tell us about your books.
Well, in light of the conversation that we've had today, that's so illuminating. In the words of Dylan Thomas, rage against the dying of the light. And that's why we're all here, I think, is that we're not running from something, we're running towards something. And that was the exploration of my books. And if you get into the first volume, The Arcana of the Grail Angel, the crux of the matter in the Legend of the Grail is that Parzival can only make it to the Grail Castle if he can take his half-brother Firafriz with him. Firafriz is a Moor or a Muslim, and he's of a different mother. But Parzival's Christian, and Firafriz is of a Muslim mother, and yet he has to bring him to the Castle of the Grail. Okay, well, what does that mean? It means that there has to be a sense of approachment, a sense of community, that the whole concept is to spiritualize the earth. It's up to us to spiritualize the earth. It's not something that's going to happen to us so much as it's going to be something that is a result of human activity. And we have these forces, what they describe here in Judaism as the Arav Ra. They're in opposition to this. They want us to materialize the earth until it just becomes a mechanical, whatever you want to call it. And so it's up to us to take up this challenge. And within my books, The Arcana of the Grail Angel and Arcana of Light on the Path, maybe I am Spectrum also, I don't know, but I get into such intense detail regarding the cosmology, the history, the personages involved, with understanding exactly what it means to develop a heart to where it's capable of receiving the grace of the divine by whatever description you may give it. And I admit that these books are challenging, but some people are up to the challenge, and so I say bless them, and I bless anybody who's trying to put out anything positive.
Thank you, John. And I will just terminate by citing a small brief excerpt from my book, Volume 4, which, of course, ends up with the Hopi prophecies. And I'm glad to say that I actually, even if I have only 1% of Indian native blood, I've actually been invited the next month to be initiated into the Lakota Indian tribe. I mean, it's a very big honor, so I'm very honored by that, and I'm glad to announce it to everybody. The announcement that the Hopi Indians made was that there will be a time in which Pa'ana will return. He should bring with him the dawn of the fifth world. He should plant the seeds of his wisdom in their hearts. And even now, the seeds are being planted here at the Pew every week with this incredible panel constituted by, I have the honor, of course, of having with me in this panel John Barnwell, Reverend David William Parry, Lowell from Jerusalem, who I call a brilliant autistic, and he actually repented me and said, you shouldn't call me brilliant because otherwise they think. But I think that really Lowell.
Everybody's brilliant here. There's so much brilliance. Our audience should put on their sunglasses or their virtual reality viewer.
And of course, we have Roseanne Barr, who is making us all shine together with her, Lady Roseanne Barr. So thank you so much for being with us. You want to deliver a prayer like each week? We have this closing moment with a prayer, usually by Roseanne, and please don't disappear. Last week, Reverend David William Parry disappeared because he was taken over by a hurricane. I mean, he suddenly, we saw him going around with his phone, and the fact was that there was actually, you were hit by a hurricane in England, no, David? There was some kind of problem you had. The electricity went away. Open the mouth.
Apologies to everyone. I tried to use my phone, but the entire network was down in the area, and even my phone wasn't working properly. So they're now downgrading it from a hurricane to a storm. It really felt like a hurricane. Hurricane Dennis managed to knock out half of the lights and electricity in South London, and I was in the unlucky half. So my apologies to all of you. My apologies to our viewers, but there was absolutely nothing I can do. And there's been a spectral presence where you see me briefly, then I disappear again.
No worries. So let's go one step at a time. First of all, our special Jewish prayer, Roseanne, and then we go to our Christian David in this attempt to, of course, have a 50-50 view and pew. Please, Roseanne.
Well, today I want to say a prayer for the whole world and to say, to fill in maybe some a view that I feel I should bring here. When Lowell said the fight between Jacob and Esau, I want to bring in that I believe the fight is between Sarah and Hagar. And
wow.
For that, I pray for, and I have spent 20 odd years in action for that, the healing between the women, because I think that nothing will change until that happens. And a prayer for peace between those grandmothers. And also because it's an interesting time bringing the Bible to today. In Iran is trying to, the government of Iran is trying to demonize and get rid of the tomb of Esther and Mordecai, which is in Iran. They're trying to demonize it and remove it from Iran, because the story of Esther is very much a story about today. And also it has a lot to do with what we talked about today, which
well,
is...
actually, karmically speaking, Roseanne, they are getting it back because Iran is in a state of panic, and the principal Shiite place of prayer is actually the epidemic center, and people are running away from it, going towards northern Iran, escaping southern Iran because of what is happening. I mean, karma is also affecting certain nations, I think.
I think so too. When we were talking about evil and how it has, I mean, this is a purely Jewish and probably chauvinistic way of looking at it, but I can't help it. That's how I am. And, you know, this satanic thing that is after us and has been after us and unleashed on us for thousands of years, it's passing away. And so that's why it's angry right now, because we're winning. And so it just seems stronger when in fact it's weaker. And I will make a, I don't know what you call it. I'll just say that I believe that Israel will come up with a cure for this virus. All those things seem to originate in Israel now that the people of Israel have been returned to their national character, which is one of healing for the whole world. So with that, I pray, amen.
Amen to that. And please, Father David, tell us your prayer of the week.
Well, I mean, John said something very important about sin. I mean, it does mean missing the mark. And each day we miss the mark. But what's important is our orientation, the orientation beneath that. Are we aiming to be good? Are we aiming to be truthful? Are we aiming to be loving? That's the important thing. Because we're human. But are we humans aiming into the light? And I think we are. Overall, we are. Firstly, I'd like to pray for my brothers and sisters in Italy. Forgive me a moment if I'm chauvinistic and particularly for my friends in Rome. I've been treated with such great hospitality every time I go there. We always go and pay homage to the statue of Giordano Bruno before we go any further.
In Campo de Fiori, I used to live there.
An beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. The whole of Italy is beautiful, but I pray especially for my Roman and my Italian friends in this time of great testing. It's always darkest before the dawn, and the spirit of healing is amongst us all. And I'd just like to say for the PEW and the sons and daughters of light, we're winning. We're winning. Our high-raised ruminations will never end, and like a wheel which ever moves but never jars, our will and wish will now by love be impelled, that love which moves the sun and all the stars. Bless you all.
God bless you all. This was The PEW, the 6th episode of our show that aims to reach the unreachable. God bless.